Good morning and welcome again to A Simple Word. These little preparation homilies are in anticipation of the coming Sunday. And this is the 33rd Sunday, which means, and I'm sure you are aware of this, we have one more Sunday in the cycle of these numbered Sundays, and that's next Sunday. That will be the Feast of Christ the King. And then this year ends with the first weekend of Advent. We move from the C cycle of St. Luke, whom we have been listening to all this year, over now into the A cycle, beginning again with St. Matthew. And when you go to church this coming weekend, you will hear texts from the prophet Malachi, whom we don't hear very much from. And then St. Paul saying to some things to the Thessalonians, and then Jesus in the Gospel of Luke in a conversation with people about the temple and the way the temple that took so many years to build can be destroyed. And of course, Jesus is aware that the temple will be destroyed because the Romans are going to be coming to Jerusalem and they will level absolutely everything. There will not be a stone upon a stone. And so Jesus is engaged in this conversation with people, and the feeling, the mood of the texts is a mood of preparation for the end. So I suppose it's good for us to stop and think about this. Our tendency is maybe not to want to consider the end, the day of death. But the fact of the matter is, as we are told in Malachi, the day will come, whether we like it or not. And it's a question of being prepared. I have just come home from a weekend giving a retreat outside of New Orleans to over 70 women. And this retreat house, the Senecal on the Lake retreat house, has been providing spiritual nourishment and refreshment to women in particular for over, I would say, 75 years. Very important center, and I have been there back and forth through almost 40 years. And I've come to appreciate New Orleans for the beautiful city that it is. Peter Cooley is a professor of English at Tulane University, and he's also the poetry editor of a magazine called Christianity and Literature. And he has a lovely book of poetry that deals with the afterlife. In fact, the title of the book is Night Bus to the Afterlife. And he's picturing himself sitting on Magazine Street, one of the lovely, quiet, but very action-filled city streets in New Orleans on the edge of the French Quarter. And he's having a cup of coffee, and he says in this particular poem, "The day, without question, will come for you, and hopefully you will be ready, because you always are, ready for beauty to be its opposite." Because he's talking about death. The earth is preparing for you and your frail bodies. Your family and your friends are weary of you. And so there's a great clinging to breath. I don't want to let go. And yet here is a beautiful poetic insight that the day will come, and it is what we're hearing in Malachi and also in Paul's letter to the Thessalonians. Be prepared. Be prepared. And Jesus, in this conversation with the people about the temple, saying, because they're questioning what's going to happen in the future. And Jesus prepares them by saying, the future is going to come for all of us, as Peter Cooley says in his poem, as Paul says to the Thessalonians, the day will come, and it is a question of being ready. So, How do we get ready for this final day that all of us are going to experience? And this is the beauty of the scriptures, because Jesus in his conversation would say, yes, there's going to be apocalyptic times. There's going to be war. There's going to be famine. Nations are rising up against nations. And I suppose a lot of that is part of the picture of the world this morning in our time in history. But Jesus says, be prepared by having a life of prayer, by having a life of charity. Interestingly enough, Pope Francis, back in 2016, issued a little, I don't know whether you would call it an encyclical, more like a pastoral letter called On Mercy and Misery, Misericordia et Misera. And he said, as long as Lazarus is outside on the step of our door and we are not attending to him, looking after him and taking care of him, and all the people that are like him, then we are not getting ready and we are not prepared. Because when the day comes, it's not going to be about the edifices that we have built, the money that we have collected, the academic accolades that we have been given, and in our case as priests and friars, the compliments and the affirmations that people are kind enough to give to us. That is not the ticket to ride. The ticket to ride is what we have done in building a relationship with the Lord and also taking care of the poor. Pope Francis named the 33rd Sunday in ordinary time as the Sunday that we want to become conscious of the Lazaruses that are outside of our lives, and we are seeing them every day, and we get prepared for the final day when the Lord will come and summon us home, not by fear, not by anxiety, not by worry, not by rubbing our heads and eating our teeth and so forth. We get prepared by acts of devotion and acts of charity. We become conscious. And of course, Pope Francis sort of said that over and over again. The worst thing that can happen to any of us is to become caught up in a culture of indifference, where if it's not bothering me and it's not touching me, I'm not going to get involved. We do get involved, because if Lazarus is outside, then the work of charity, the work of justice is yet to be accomplished, not by just the politicians in the great capitals of the world, but in the small and quiet lives and communities in which we live individually, regardless of what walk of life we have been called to live and to do. And so pay attention as you come to Mass this coming Sunday. Be sensitive to what the texts are saying to us. Because interestingly enough, St. Paul says to the Thessalonians, the world is filled with busybodies, people that are nebbing around in everybody else's business, and they have lost their focus. The focus has got to be on what's important, what's enduring, what's everlasting. And that is deepening a relationship with Jesus, who is the same yesterday, today, and forever, and also becoming deeply sensitive to the needs of our brothers and our sisters who are in the world around us. We prepare by devotion and by charity, by love and mercy. We want to listen to these things this coming Sunday because their scriptures are rich and they're very challenging. Those people in the gospel were talking about the temple and how long it had been built. And Jesus said, this can all be eliminated overnight, and it will be eliminated. He didn't mention specifically that the Romans were not going to leave one stone upon the other, but it can all be passing and transitory. What endures is devotion to Jesus, a deep and rich spiritual life, and a sensitivity to our brothers and our sisters who are in need. Peter Maurin, who was a companion of Dorothy Day, used to always say, there are no pockets in a shroud. What we take into eternal life are the good deeds, the charitable deeds, and the merciful deeds that we extend to one another. So these readings, preparing us for the ultimate end of time, challenge us to live in this time with care and devotion to the Lord and to one another. So I thank you for listening once again, and hopefully I'll see you the next time around. God bless you, and happy Thanksgiving.